The diner went dead silent, the kind of silence that feels heavier than the humid air of a coming storm. My knuckles were split, stinging with that sharp, hot pain that tells you you've hit bone. And the man on the floor was gasping for air, clutching his ribs where I'd put him down. I stood over him, breathing hard, just trying to make sure he stayed down, when the door swung open and the state trooper walked in, hand already on his holster. The bully on the floor grinned through bloody teeth, thinking he'd won, thinking the badge meant my end. But then the trooper's eyes locked onto my left forearm, where my sleeve had been torn away in the scuffle. He froze. He didn't unholster his weapon. He didn't shout commands. He just stared at the faded black ink on my skin, his face draining of color. The bully started laughing. "Arrest him! He assaulted an officer." But the trooper wasn't listening to him anymore. He was looking at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city and mile marker. We love seeing how far our stories travel." The rain was coming down in sheets, hammering the windshield of the Peterbilt like 1,000 tiny fists trying to break through the glass. It was one of those nights in Georgia where the air felt thick enough to chew on, hot and sticky despite the storm. I was hauling 40,000 pounds of steel pipe destined for a construction site in Savannah, and the weight of the load was pushing me down onto the asphalt, keeping the tires gripping even as the water pooled in the ruts of I-16. My back was aching, that dull throb right at the base of the spine that every long hauler knows intimately. A reminder that I'd been in the seat for 10 hours straight. I needed coffee. I needed to stretch. I needed to not be staring at the hypnotic rhythm of the wipers for 20 minutes. I saw the glow of the Dixie King truck stop up ahead, a beacon of yellow neon cutting through the grey wash of the storm. I signalled right, the heavy click-click of the indicator acting as a metronome for my heartbeat, and geared down. The engine brake growled, a low guttural roar that vibrated through the floorboards and up into my boots. I rolled into the lot, dodging the deep puddles that looked like black lakes under the yard lights, and parked the rig in the back row, away from the reefers buzzing like angry hornets. I grabbed my jacket, an old waxed canvas thing that smelled of diesel and rain, and made a dash for the diner. Inside it was warm, smelling of frying bacon, old coffee and industrial cleaner. It wasn't crowded, just a few locals in a booth, a couple of other drivers hunched over their phones, and a family near the window. I took a stool at the counter, keeping my back to the wall. Old habits die hard. You spend enough time in places you don't want to be. You learn to keep your eyes on the exits and the room in front of you. I ordered a black coffee and a slice of pecan pie, just watching the reflection of the room in the dark window glass. That's when I noticed the family in the booth. There was a kid, couldn't have been more than 19, sitting there in a crisp, new army dress uniform. High and tight haircut, eyes bright, looking like he was trying to sit up straighter than his spine allowed. Across from him was an older man, clearly his dad, wearing a trucker hat and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. The dad was beaming, looking at the kid like he'd hung the moon. It was a good scene. Quiet, respectful. The kind of thing that makes you remember what people are fighting for, but peace never lasts on the road. The door banged open, letting in a gust of wet wind and the roar of the storm. 3 men walked in. They were loud, taking up too much space immediately. The leader was a big guy, thick in the neck and heavy in the gut, wearing a tactical vest over a t-shirt that was 2 sizes too small, trying to show off arms that were more fat than muscle. He had that look, the look of a man who's used to pushing people around because nobody pushes back. He scanned the room, looking for a target, looking for attention. He saw the kid. "Well, look at this," the big guy boomed, his voice grating like gravel in a blender. He walked over to their booth, his 2 buddies trailing behind him, smirking. "We got us a war hero in the Dixie King." The kid stiffened. "Just having dinner with my dad, sir." "Sir?" The big guy laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Don't sir me, Boot. You don't know who I am." He leaned in, putting his hands on their table, invading their space. "I did 3 tours while you were still wetting the bed. What unit are you with? Reserves? National Guard? Weekend warrior?" I took a sip of my coffee, feeling the heat slide down my throat, but my eyes were locked on the reflection. I didn't want to get involved. I just wanted my pie and to get back on the road. I told myself it wasn't my business. The kid could handle himself. "I'm with the 3rd Infantry deploying next week," the kid said, his voice shaking just a little. "Deploying?" the man sneered. He reached out and flicked the ribbons on the kid's chest. "They give these out in Cracker Jack boxes now. You look soft, boy. You look like you're going to get your platoon killed." The dad stood up then. He wasn't a big man, but he was angry. "Hey, leave him alone. He's serving his country. Show some respect." The big guy turned his head slowly to the dad, his eyes dead and cold. "Sit down, old man, before I sit you down." One of the goons laughed. "Tell him, Mitchell." Mitchell turned back to the kid. "You know, in my outfit, we didn't let Boots eat until the real men were done. I think you're in my seat." "There are plenty of other tables," the kid said, trying to de-escalate, but his face was red. "I want this one," Mitchell said. He grabbed the kid's plate of burger and fries and shoved it off the table. It crashed onto the floor, ketchup splattering the kid's polished shoes. That was the line. I felt that old, cold switch flip in the back of my head. The coffee cup rattled slightly as I set it down on the saucer. I didn't want to do this. I really didn't. But I couldn't watch a father be humiliated in front of his son, and I couldn't watch a soldier be treated like trash by a blowhard. I swiveled on my stool and stood up. I'm not a young man anymore, but I've got size on me, and years of throwing chains and tarps have kept the rust off the hinges. I walked over, my boots heavy on the linoleum. "Pick it up," I said. My voice was low, barely over the sound of the rain outside, but it carried. Mitchell turned, blinking like he hadn't even noticed me there. He looked me up and down, saw the grey in my beard, the slight paunch over my belt, the flannel shirt. He grinned. "Excuse me. You talking to me, Grandpa?" I said, "Pick it up," I repeated, stopping about 5 feet from him. "You made a mess. You ruined the man's meal. Pick it up, apologize, and buy him a new one." Mitchell laughed, looking at his friends. "You hear this? Trucker trash thinks he's the sheriff." He stepped away from the booth and squared up to me. He was tall, maybe 6'2", but he stood sloppy, chin up, chest out, telegraphing everything. "Go back to your truck, fat boy. This is official business. There's nothing official about bullying a kid," I said, keeping my hands loose at my sides. "Last chance." "Or what?" Mitchell sneered. He shoved me hard. I didn't move. My boots were planted, my center of gravity low. He might as well have shoved a brick wall. He looked surprised, his eyes widening just a fraction. "Or I make you," I said. Mitchell snarled and threw a wild right hook aimed at my jaw. It was slow, sloppy. A barroom haymaker meant to scare someone who didn't know how to fight. I stepped inside the arc of the punch, the movement automatic, a ghost from a life I left behind a long time ago. I drove my left shoulder into his chest, knocking the wind out of him, and brought my right hand down in a chop to the inside of his bicep. His arm went dead, dropping to his side. He gasped, stumbling back. "You son of a—" His 2 friends jumped in. Now it was a party. The first friend, a wiry guy with a goatee, lunged for my legs. I sidestepped, grabbing the back of his collar and the belt of his jeans, and used his own momentum to run him face first into the wall. He hit with a sickening thud and slid down, out cold. The second guy, bigger than the first but smaller than Mitchell, hesitated. He saw his buddy drop and froze. That hesitation was his mistake. I closed the distance, grabbed his wrist, twisted it behind his back until he yelped, and marched him toward the door. I shoved him out into the rain. "Stay out," I growled. I turned back to Mitchell. He had recovered his breath and was looking at me with pure hate now. He reached behind his back, pulling a telescoping baton from his belt. He flicked it open with a metallic snick. "Now you're dead," he hissed. "Assaulting a private military contractor. You have no idea the world of hurt you just stepped into." "I'm shaking," I said, my voice flat. He swung the baton, aiming for my head. "A strike like that can kill you. I couldn't just block it. I had to commit." I ducked under the swing, feeling the wind of it rush past my ear, and drove a solid uppercut into his solar plexus. He doubled over, dropping the baton. I followed it with a knee to the face. Mitchell crumbled to the floor, blood pouring from his nose. The diner was silent. The cook was staring over the pass-through window, spatula frozen in midair. The kid and his dad were wide-eyed. I took a deep breath, adjusting my jacket. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. I looked at the kid. "You okay, son?" "Yes, sir," he stammered. "He's not done," the dad whispered, pointing. I looked down. Mitchell was groaning, reaching for a radio clipped to his belt. He clicked it. "All units, officer down. Dixie King, send backup. Send everyone." I kicked the radio out of his hand, but the message had gone through. "You're done," Mitchell wheezed, spitting blood. "My team is outside. The sheriff is on my payroll. You're never leaving this county." I walked over to the window. Outside, through the rain, I saw headlights snapping on. Not just one car. 3 SUVs were peeling out from the shadows of the parking lot, blocking the exit. They were boxing us in. This wasn't just a bar fight anymore. This was a siege. I looked at the dad. "Get your boy in the kitchen. Stay down." "What about you?" the kid asked, standing up. "I can fight." "You've got a deployment to make," I said. "I've got a load of pipe that's already late. Let me handle this." I walked to the door and locked it. It was a flimsy lock, wouldn't hold for long. I grabbed a heavy oak chair and jammed it under the handle. I knew I couldn't take on a whole squad of these guys inside a glass box. I needed leverage. I needed the dark. I looked at Mitchell, still writhing on the floor. "Who are you, really?" "Major Mitchell," he spat. "Blackwood Security. We own this town." I sighed. Private security. Wannabe soldiers with too much gear and no rules of engagement. Dangerous. I looked at the exit. Blocked. I looked at the kitchen. No back door, just a delivery bay that was probably locked from the outside. I was trapped in a fishbowl with a dozen angry mercenaries coming to collect their boss. I took off my jacket. It was too hot for it now, and it restricted my movement. I rolled up the sleeves of my flannel shirt. As I did, the fabric caught on the watch I was wearing and tore a jagged strip loose, exposing my left forearm. I didn't pay it any mind. "Open up!" a voice boomed from outside, amplified by a megaphone. "Come out with your hands up or we open fire." I looked at the waitress, a trembling older lady named Doris. "Doris, get behind the counter. Stay low." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Be careful, sugar." I moved to the side of the door, pressing my back against the wall. "You want him?" I yelled out. "Come and get him." I knew what was coming. They weren't going to wait. Glass shattered as a brick came flying through the window, followed by a canister, tear gas. They were flushing us out. Smoke started to fill the room, stinging my eyes, burning my throat. The kid started coughing. "Kitchen, now!" I roared at the family. I grabbed a wet rag from a bus tub and held it to my face. I grabbed Mitchell by the back of his vest and dragged him up. "You're my ticket out of here." "Get off me!" he screamed, but he was too weak to fight. I kicked the chair away and unlocked the door. I shoved Mitchell out first, using him as a human shield. "Hold fire! Hold fire!" someone shouted outside. I stepped out into the rain, the cool air hitting my face like a blessing after the gas. I had Mitchell in a chokehold, my arm wrapped tight around his neck. We were surrounded, 6 guys in tactical gear, weapons raised, standing behind the doors of their SUVs. High beams blinded me. "Let him go!" one of them shouted. "Back off!" I yelled back, tightening my grip. "Back the trucks up and let us leave." "You have 3 seconds!" the voice yelled. Then, from the darkness behind the SUVs, more lights appeared. Blue lights. The sheriff. Great. If Mitchell was telling the truth and the law was in his pocket, I was about to get shot by the people paid to protect me. 2 cruisers skidded to a halt, blocking the SUVs from behind. A state trooper stepped out. He was tall, wearing the wide-brimmed hat, his raincoat slick with water. He looked authoritative, calm. "Drop the weapon!" the trooper shouted, aiming at the mercenaries. "He's the aggressor!" one of the mercenaries yelled, pointing at me. "He has the major hostage." The trooper looked at me, then at Mitchell, then at the mercenaries. It was a standoff, a powder keg waiting for a match. "I said, 'Everyone weapons down,'" the trooper commanded. He walked forward, brave or stupid, walking right into the line of fire. He came up to the sidewalk where I was standing with Mitchell. "Let him go, driver," the trooper said to me. "I got this." "He says he owns you," I said, not letting go. "He says a lot of things," the trooper said, stepping closer. The rain was washing the blood off Mitchell's face, dripping onto my arm. The trooper was close now, within arm's reach. He raised his flashlight, shining it on us. The beam hit my face, then moved down to Mitchell, then drifted to my arm, which was wrapped across Mitchell's chest. The light caught the ink. The trooper froze. He stopped walking. He stopped breathing. The rain hammered around us, the only sound in the sudden, terrifying silence. He stared at the tattoo on my forearm. It was old, the lines slightly blurred by time, but the design was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. A specific dagger wrapped in a specific type of vine, with a set of numbers underneath that you don't get for just passing basic training. The trooper's eyes went wide. He looked from the tattoo to my face, searching. "Sir?" he whispered. Mitchell, sensing the hesitation, tried to twist free. "Shoot him! What are you waiting for?" But the trooper didn't shoot. He lowered his gun. He stood up straighter, his posture shifting from aggressive cop to something else, something subordinate. "Stand down!" the trooper yelled to the mercenaries, his voice cracking with authority. I said, "Stand down immediately." "What?" the lead mercenary yelled. "He's got the major." "I don't care if he's got the president," the trooper shouted, turning to face them, putting his back to me. He was protecting me. "You drop those weapons right now, or I will authorize lethal force against you." I felt the tension shift. Mitchell felt it too. He went limp in my arms. "What is this?" Mitchell whispered. "Do you know who I am?" "I know who he is," the trooper said softly, glancing back at me over his shoulder. "And if you knew, you'd be praying right now." I didn't say a word, I just held the line. The trooper looked at me again, his eyes locking onto mine with a mixture of awe and fear. "Commander?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the rain. Is that really you?" The rain was coming down harder now, a solid curtain of water that blurred the red and blue lights into a violent strobing haze. I didn't answer the trooper. I didn't have to. The silence between us was answer enough. He saw the unit patch in the ink, the specific curvature of the vines that marked a group that didn't officially exist on any deployment roster. It was a ghost mark, and seeing it on a trucker in a Georgia diner parking lot had clearly short-circuited his brain. "Step away from the suspect," the trooper said again, to the mercenaries, his voice harder this time. He unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, I have an officer in distress, requesting immediate heavy backup, shots fired, multiple hostiles." "You're making a mistake," the lead mercenary shouted, stepping out from behind his door. He was holding an AR-15, the muzzle drifting dangerously between me and the trooper. "That man is assaulting a federal contractor." "I don't see a contractor," the trooper yelled back, not flinching. "I see an armed gang threatening a civilian and a peace officer. Drop it, now." Mitchell, still in my grip, started to laugh. It was a wet, gurgling sound. "You idiot!" he wheezed against my arm. "He's one cop. We have 6 guns. Do the math." He was right. The trooper was brave, but he was outgunned. And I saw the shift in the mercenaries' eyes. They were calculating. They realized they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. If they let us go, they went to jail. If they silenced us, well, Blackwood Security probably had cleaners for that. The mercenary on the far left started to flank, moving into the shadows between the trucks. He was moving to get a clear line of sight on the trooper. I couldn't wait for backup. By the time the cavalry arrived, we'd be full of holes. "Trooper!" I barked. "Left flank!" The trooper spun, but he was a split second too slow. The flanking merc raised his rifle. I didn't think, I acted. I shoved Mitchell forward with everything I had, launching him like a battering ram into the trooper, knocking them both to the wet pavement just as the crack of a rifle shot split the air. The bullet shattered the window of the diner behind, where the trooper had been standing. Chaos erupted. "Get down!" I roared. I dove behind the front wheel of the trooper's cruiser. Bullets sparked off the asphalt, whining as they ricocheted into the night. The mercenaries were opening up. They weren't playing anymore. This was a kill box. I looked at the trooper. He was dazed, pinned under Mitchell's bulk, scrambling for his weapon. Mitchell was trying to claw the trooper's eyes out. I couldn't stay pinned. We needed an equalizer. I looked up. My Peterbilt was 30 feet away, idling, the engine rumbling like a sleeping dragon, but 30 feet might as well have been 30 miles in a firefight. Then I saw the fuel tanker parked right next to the mercenaries' SUVs. I grabbed a handful of gravel from the ground. I waited for the lull, the split second when they paused to reload or communicate. Pop, pop, pop. Pause. Now. I broke cover. I didn't run away. I ran at them. It's the last thing people expect. They expect you to cower. They don't expect a 250-pound trucker to charge into the teeth of the gun line. The lead merc saw me coming and swung his rifle. I hit him low, a tackle that would have made my high school coach proud, driving my shoulder into his gut. We hit the water-slick tarmac hard, sliding into the side of his SUV. The rifle skittered away into the dark. He scrambled for a knife on his vest. I didn't give him time. I drove a fist into his throat, crushing his windpipe. He gagged, eyes bulging, and went limp. I grabbed his radio. "Cease fire!" I screamed into it, mimicking Mitchell's gravelly voice as best I could. "Cease fire! I've got him!" It bought me 3 seconds of confusion. I rolled to my feet, grabbing the fallen rifle. I didn't fire it. I reversed it, holding it by the barrel like a club. 2 mercenaries came around the back of the SUV. I swung the stock of the rifle, connecting with the first guy's helmet. Crack! He dropped. The second guy hesitated, just like in the diner. That hesitation is always the difference between living and dying. I kicked his knee, hearing the joint pop, and as he buckled, I drove the butt of the rifle into his jaw. 4 down, 2 to go. "Jack, get down!" It was the trooper. He had managed to subdue Mitchell and was now using the cruiser door for cover, his service weapon leveled. I dropped to the tarmac just as the trooper fired 2 controlled shots. The back window of the SUV above me shattered. The last 2 mercenaries, realizing their leader was captured and their flank was gone, threw their weapons down and raised their hands. "Don't shoot! Don't shoot!" I lay there on the wet asphalt, chest heaving, rain mixing with the sweat and blood on my face. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by the deep, aching exhaustion that always comes after. Sirens wailed in the distance, real backup, a lot of it. I stood up slowly, tossing the rifle onto the hood of the SUV. I walked over to the trooper. He was cuffing Mitchell, who was sobbing now, all the fight gone out of him. The trooper looked up at me. He looked at the carnage, the unconscious men, the shattered glass, the steam rising from the hot brass casings on the ground. Then he looked at my arm again. "I haven't seen that ink since Fallujah," the trooper said quietly. "04. Phantom Platoon." I rolled my sleeve down, covering the mark. "I was just a driver, deputy, hauling supplies." The trooper stood up, dragging Mitchell with him. He wiped the rain from his eyes. "Respectfully, sir." "Bullshit. Drivers didn't do what you just did." I didn't answer. I just walked over to the diner window. Inside, the family was safe. The dad was holding his son, and the kid was looking out at me through the spider-webbed glass. He gave me a nod, a slow, solemn nod of understanding. He saw the cost now. He saw that the ribbons and the uniforms are one thing, but the fight is dirty and wet and hurts like hell. The parking lot filled up with blue lights. Deputies swarmed the scene, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The trooper intercepted them, pointing at me and shaking his head. I saw him mouth the words, "He's a friendly. Stand down." A paramedic tried to check me over. "Sir, you're bleeding." "I'm fine," I said, waving him off. "Check the kid inside." He took some gas. I walked back to my truck. My hands were shaking a little now, the adrenaline crash. I needed to sit down. I needed to get the smell of violence out of my nose. I climbed into the cab of the Pete. It smelled like stale coffee and diesel, the best smell in the world. I sat there for a moment in the dark, just breathing. A knock on the door. I rolled down the window. It was the trooper. He wasn't wearing his hat now. He looked young, tired. "They're taking Mitchell in," he said. "Federal charges. Assault on an officer, attempted murder, possession of illegal modifications. He's done. His company is done." "Good," I said. "The kid, the soldier," the trooper said. "He wanted to thank you, but he was too shaken up." "He doesn't need to thank me," I said. "He just needs to come home safe." The trooper reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. He handed it to me. "If you ever come through this county again, you don't pay for coffee. And if you ever get stopped, show them this." I took the card. It was his personal number. "What's your handle, driver?" he asked. "Redline," I said. He nodded. "Drive safe, Redline, and thank you for your service. Then and now." He stepped back and saluted. It wasn't a lazy, half-hearted salute. It was crisp, perfect, a salute to a superior officer. I didn't return it. I just nodded, put the truck in gear, and released the brakes. The air hissed, a long sigh of relief. I rolled out of the lot, leaving the blue lights and the questions behind. The rain was letting up, breaking into a light drizzle. I drove for another 100 miles before I stopped again. The radio chattered with local drivers talking about the war zone at the Dixie King. Wild rumors flying about SWAT teams and cartels. I turned it off. I didn't want the noise. I pulled onto the shoulder of a quiet stretch of highway, the Georgia pines standing tall and black against the moonlight that was finally breaking through the clouds. My arm throbbed where the old wound was, under the tattoo. It always hurt when it rained, or maybe it just hurt when I remembered too much. I thought about that kid in the diner, the way he looked at his dad, the way he stood up even when he was scared. He had the fire. I just hoped the world didn't extinguish it. I hoped he wouldn't end up like me, eating pie in a parking lot, carrying ghosts that were heavier than any steel pipe. I reached into the glove box and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It was frayed at the edges. Me, 20 years younger, leaner, meaner, standing next to a Humvee with 3 other guys. We were smiling. We didn't know yet. I looked at the photo, then looked at the empty seat next to me. "We kept 'em safe, boys," I whispered to the empty cab. "We held the line." I tucked the photo back away. I put the truck in gear. The engine hummed, a steady, reliable rhythm that vibrated in my chest. I wasn't a commander anymore. I wasn't a hero. I was just a trucker with a load to deliver and a long road ahead. But tonight, the road felt a little less lonely. I merged back onto the highway, watching the white lines dash by, disappear under the hood and fade into the past. Just keep moving. That's the only rule that matters. Just keep moving. Thank you for watching. And if stories like this one about courage, sacrifice, and second chances speak to you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us share more incredible true stories that honor the forgotten heroes among us.